So recently Bethesda revealed what the first monthly reward card in 2019 is going to be. We're going to get this after the month of January concludes, and it's Renegade Magister. This is a 5-cost 5/5. It's an intelligence card, so it's blue. It's a dark elf, if that matters to you. Maybe someday there will be some tribal synergy, but has a very interesting effect. After a friendly action damages an enemy creature, Renegade Magister deals that much damage to that creature. Now, this is a really neat and interesting effect for a couple of reasons. The first and most obvious reason that people are going to want to run this card is to make Ice Storm deal double damage, right? Let's just get the obvious thing out of the way. This is a 5-cost 5/5, so statistically, as far as blue creatures go, that's actually pretty decent. And the fact that it survives Ice Storm and then will also make Ice Storm deal 6 damage to all enemy creatures where it's only dealing 3 to your own is a pretty big deal, because 6 damage is enough to start killing things like Bleak Coast Troll and all of those other much larger threats. Mid-range decks have kind of been preying on Ice Storm based decks for a while now, because the idea is that instead of going with a wide board, you go with a board of Young Mammoth, and then Bleak Coast Troll, and then whatever, so that by the time Ice Storm comes online, it's not effective enough at clearing the board. So this card, you can plop it down, and if it survives, and if it isn't silenced, will then make that really effective. That's good, right? That's the obvious use, and I'm sure it's what a lot of people are going to be most excited about. But there are some really cool other effects to take into account here, right? So I'm not saying that these are things that you necessarily want to build around, but they are fun things to think about. For example, if you grant this keywords, it's going to have an effect because it's the creature that deals the bonus damage. It's not that the action deals double damage. So if you somehow give this lethal, for example, and you deal damage to a massive creature, even if the direct damage and the bonus damage are somehow both not enough to kill it, the lethal part would, because Renegade Magister would be dealing the damage. And even in the case of something like Mage's Trick, right, where you're only doing 1 damage, or Rapid Shot. Again, if this has lethal, right, so maybe you're playing a Dagoth deck or something, or even maybe it's just Battle Mage and you've got some Royal Sage action that's granted you a random keyword. Who knows? The point is, if this somehow gets lethal and then you ping something for like 1, but then Magister pings it for 1, it will deal the lethal damage and kill that creature. So that's a really cool effect. And the same thing applies with Breakthrough. So if you have like a 5 health creature and your Magister has Breakthrough, and you lightning bolt the 5 health creature, it's going to go down to 1 health, and then the Magister is going to deal 4 damage as well, and that should apply Breakthrough as long as you're playing this action on your turn. And that is, again, fringe case scenario, but a really cool effect. Another thing that I think might be lost on first glance is how effective this card is at dealing with creatures that have Ward. So if somebody has like a Daggerfall Mage, a Ward Crafter, a Windkeep Spellsword, those creatures in the past have been very, very resilient against cards like Firebolt, against cards like Reverberating Strike, because the Ward protects them from damage. Renegade Magister makes it so that when you Firebolt a Windkeep Spellsword, the Firebolt will remove the Ward, but then the Magister will try to deal damage as well, and that will remove the creature. So this card enables control decks to be very effective against creatures with Ward, and I think that is important. And again, a 5/5 for 5 like isn't amazing, right? There's a reason Memory Erase doesn't see a ton of play. This also doesn't have any effect when it immediately hits the board. It does typically either have to stick around, or you have to play this much later in the game and pair it with an action. But the fact that you can play this on curve as a relatively resilient 5/5, probably hide it in the Shadow Lane or something, and then on the following turn play Ice Storm, does matter. And the fact that you can, again, play this, and while the 5/5 isn't like super aggressive in terms of like things to write home about. If you're playing this, you're probably not playing an aggressive deck. You're probably playing a control deck. So you're setting up for a value play. And this has the potential to do just that. I think the biggest problem it's going to have is if you're playing something like Tribunal Control, there are some other 5-drops that will want to compete with it in terms of slot. Doppelganger is a popular one. Obviously, Iron is going to be running Mage and Tribunal Control lists. And if we're not talking about Mage or Tribunal, let's be honest, like nobody plays Sorcerer Control really. Nobody really plays Assassin Control. Even the non-like tempo-oriented assassins are typically either just straight burn or they're more combo-oriented. And this is, in my opinion, most definitely a control card at the moment. Now, because of its pretty unique ability, in the future, if other cards are printed, or perhaps I'm just at the time of recording this missing something super obvious, there is a chance that this might see play in other decks. But right now, this feels like it's a card that's meant to help control decks, specifically ones that use direct damage actions to remove creatures, right? You can get a lot of value, for example, late game, out of your reverberating strikes or your crushing blows or even your firebolts if this is on the board, because turning your firebolt into something that kills a young mammoth is a pretty big deal. So yes, it doesn't have an immediate impact, but it does allow you to start generating an awful lot of value, and that's something that's been missing from control decks for a while. So I do like it in that regard. I think that it is at least worth testing. Whether or not it's going to be constructed viable at the highest levels of play, I don't know. It's going to require some testing, but I like, at least on paper, the kinds of things that it allows you to do. One last thing I want to note is that this is a second separate source of damage, and so if you want to do some meme things, there's some pretty cool stuff you can do as well. For example, if you want to build a deck around like pinging Brasilisk or Fetcherfly Golem or any of those creatures that give you bonuses when they take damage, you could play Renegade Magister, and then perhaps like you rapid shot your Fetcherfly and it makes a dude, and then Renegade Magister pings it again and it makes another dude. And so there's all sorts of like cheeky fun things you can do in that regard. You can also, if you give this an item that cares about Slay, so like for example, if you give this the awesome new fork that was revealed by an amazing content creator, if you give him the new fork of Horripilation, and then you use an action to almost kill a creature, and then his ability triggers and finishes it off, because again, he's the one dealing the damage, it should trigger your Slay. So that item also can generate you some value, and or other items. So if you start thinking about like Arena, for example, throwing the Crescent on this that gives you bonuses when you slay, really, really good. The new neutral legendary item, Grimfang, and its counterpart, I believe, is also got some cool slay abilities, and you could take advantage of that with Renegade Magister in that regard as well. So yeah, I think it's neat. This isn't the sort of card that's going to take a deck and like suddenly make it be tier 1, but it gives them some new tools, and I really like the kind of value that it can generate for Mage and Tribunal control lists. I think that it will at least be something worth testing, and I'm curious to hear about how you guys plan to use it, right? Are you just going to run it in control, or are you going to try to find some cool combo things to do with it because of the ability for it to kind of create like a machine gun style of effects? You know, what are your thoughts? I love reading responses whenever new cards are revealed, because everybody plays the game differently, right? We all are different people with different play styles and different opinions, and you know, we all have different thoughts, and I like to read through them. So anyway, let me know what you think, and if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Until next time, may you walk on warm sands.